Did you know that you can be euthanized in Canada? They call it MAID, which means medical assistance in dying. It's basically legally assisted suicide? Maybe you already knew that and I'm just ignorant. But what even further shocked me was this. MAID eligibility should expand to minors, patients with mental illness, report recommends. What? I can understand the argument for MAID for people who are maybe terminally ill or experiencing excruciating pain where there is no treatment to help, but MAID for patients with mental illness? How is this even a discussion?
Hello friends, welcome to the channel. Debbie, I saw your message, so we're gonna do exactly that for you today. You asked me to check out MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying, and what's going on in Canada and how it's becoming more prevalent in the USA. Question, what is MAID exactly? So this is an official website, Canadian website, and they're talking about MAID. Let's click to see what this is about. Okay, in February 2015, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled in Carter versus Canada that parts of the criminal code will need to change to satisfy the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The parts that prohibited medical assistance in dying will no longer be valid. The Supreme Court gave the government until June 6, 2016 to create a new law. And guess what? The law was created in 2016 of the month of June. The Parliament of Canada passed the federal legislation that allow eligible Canadian adults to request medical assistance in dying. Whoa, here we are. So this is what we are talking about. This is assisted suicide. That's pretty much what it is. Now, the first question I ask is, why is there such a need for MAID? What is the process? Let's ask what the process is. I got a YouTuber here who's gonna help me with that. She's a doctor and been there at the bedside and understand what it's like to go and watch it happen herself. She's going to tell us a little bit about what goes on during this process.
Some of the viewers have asked me to describe medical assistance in dying in more detail. I'm Dr. Sammy, palliative care physician. Okay, so medical assistance in dying became legalized in Canada in 2016. And so there are typically 3 medications that are used in an IV to induce death in a medically assisted death. An IV is set up in the best veins that the person has, and a second IV is set up so that just in case something goes wrong with the first IV site, there is a backup IV site. So once those IV sites are put in, a doctor comes, a nurse practitioner can do this as well, and brings the medication with them. And in terms of what happens, the doctor will check with the patient that they still want to go ahead with it, of course. And then once they determine they're going to go ahead with it, the doctor will typically give midazolam, which is also called Versed. It's a benzodiazepine. It's a medication that is for anxiety and induces sleepiness. The second medication that's given in the IV site is propofol. Propofol is typically used in the OR. It's an anesthetic agent. It is meant to induce decreased level of consciousness, and also it's an amnestic agent so that people don't remember what's happened. Then the third injection is a medication called rocuronium, and it is a paralytic agent, and it paralyzes the muscles of breathing. So there are 3 medications that are typically injected in the IV, and it's not an IV drip, it's a syringe that gets pushed the medication right in. Now, when I have been at the bedside of a medically assisted death, I can tell you that typically the midazolam goes in, and it's like being at the dentist, or if you've ever had a procedure done where you get anesthesia and the anesthetist says to you, okay, start counting backwards from 100, and you go 100, 99, and you're asleep. So that's what typically happens when the first medication goes in. Within seconds, the person is in a deep sleep. When the propofol goes in next, the person goes into a much deeper sleep. And the doses are so high much higher than in the OR, that the person sometimes dies from the second medication. But just in case the third medication, rocuronium, goes in to make sure that the person's muscles don't allow them to breathe anymore, and then the heart stops. The whole thing takes on average from beginning to end, probably 5 minutes.
Wow. It sounds to me very much like eugenics, a modern version of it, a much more polished, sanctified version of eugenics. Or isn't that what we do to criminals on death row? Okay, I'll just leave that alone. Let's continue the video. So we hear about the process here. So let's talk about this physician explaining how they go about doing exactly that. Let's go to the first video here. All right, this is a physician here in Canada explaining how she assisted a clown with MAID, medical assistance in dying. But I want you to listen to the cordial, the attitude also. Just pay attention to how this is being discussed as if it's a good thing. But let's keep listening.
Yeah. One of the things I absolutely loved was, I mean, I have to admit to welling up several times while reading the book. One of the things about Ed, who was an amateur clown, and I think, and he was having, you were going to be administering his assisted death, and I think you must have left the room or something, or he left the room and came back dressed in his full clown regalia, including a red nose, and you asked him what that was about, you know, why was it? And he said that he wanted to go out laughing, and I just thought that was so charming. But it does lead into the fact that, from talking to you and other practitioners, it's become sort of socially accepted now that people are having assisted deaths. Everyone is so individual, and what's important to one person may not be as important or differently, important to someone else. So for Ed, it was really important that he be in his clown suit and, have this atmosphere, with him at this final moment. And somebody else might find that ridiculous, but there's a real beauty in recognizing that for Ed, this was key, and it was such a wonderful thing to be able to facilitate this with Ed. For someone else, it, like you say, it might be an event with champagne.
That felt really weird. Just the fact that we're talking about this in a way that we are, almost to the point of glorifying it, I'm very concerned. But again, this is Canada. What do we expect? All right, in the second part of this video, we're going to listen to her explaining how the law is changing. It's no longer about terminal illness, to the point where they are looking for ways to do away with that, to the point where eventually even mental health is going to become another reason to medically assisted you in dying. This is one of those things that they're pushing forward. Let's take a listen.
Our law never required terminal illness. It never required a prognosis of 6 months. It always required, originally, that the patient be on a trajectory towards their natural death with no time limit around that, allowing more of a flexible clinical interpretation. But even that was challenged because that wasn't in our original constitutional decision by the Carter case. And so for 3 or 4 years after the law was passed, it was looked at in a provincial court, and it was decided that also needed to be struck out of the law. And with the removal of that, it opened up access to assisted dying for those who weren't necessarily dying.
Exactly. Well, that's the extreme side of the thing. Now, that's been removed. We talked about this. And again, a new law was rewritten in 2016 in the month of June in Canada, which opens the door to be medically assisted in dying. Now, this is the thing that's very disturbing about this. It's going so far that some family members think, for example, let's first watch this video. This is a funeral home. And in this funeral home, it's almost like they are glorifying the idea. Instead of going to the hospital, you can come to the funeral home, make your decision right here, right now, and they can assist you to medically die, it can assist you in your suicide. And this is like something they promoting as in a positive. Look at this.
Welcome, follow me. Funeral homes have been in Mathieu Baker's family for generations, but he recently expanded the kind of service he offers.
So this is the room where you have the medical aid in dying?
Yes, this is where it happens.
People who are approved for medical assistance in dying can come here with their doctor and loved ones to end their lives at a cost of at least $700.
It's a lot of organization on our part to really make it a respectful and meaningful event for that family.
It's what Michel Brunel recently opted for. His family says he had emphysema and his quality of life had deteriorated, but he didn't want to die at home or in the hospital.
They're using a room that they have already, decorated it very nicely, allowed us the time we needed to do what we had to do, to say goodbye, let him get comfortable. It's just a beautiful option.
Yeah, a beautiful option indeed. You see, my issue with some of these things is just the extreme side of the thing. Is the extreme side. All right, this is a granddaughter talking to her grandmother to the point of excitement, asking her if she's excited about what's about to take place here. Listen to this.
I came in quietly. I'd like to go up quietly.
Are you nervous? Are you excited? How do you feel?
Looking forward to it. Just putting an end to being dependent, no control.
So as the day approaches, is it something you're thinking about every day, or
no,
just it's going to happen when it happens?
Yeah, when I'll be ready, I'll know.
Wow, this is sad. This is sad to watch. I mean, just the idea of just people willing to be canceled to let go so easily. I understand for the elderly and those who are terminally ill and stuff like that. I mean, that's been going on. We do have a system in place, even in the United States, where if you are in a really, really bad condition, families can make decision to put you on hospice care. And it's kind of what happened during that phase. But it's never been made so public, and it's never been made so so prevalent to the point where the government themselves are getting involved in making money off of it. Yeah, I said the word money, and that's the question I asked first. Why are they doing this, right? Well, here is the answer. I'm going to let Matt Walsh tell you why they are doing this.
Eugenics is making a comeback. Why is that? If you look at this as a purely political issue, it makes sense. Several years ago, Canadian politicians realized that they had a big problem. The healthcare system, which they run, wasn't able to keep up with the need for organ donors. It's a big political problem. Thousands of people were dying, waiting for transplants. So the government set out to find new ways to get more organs. And that's when they passed the first law legalizing euthanasia. Now, if you think it sounds crazy to make this connection, well, the Canadian media drew this connection immediately. Here's a headline from the Ottawa Citizen in 2020, a few years after MAID was legalized. Quote, medically assisted deaths prove a growing boon to organ donation in Ontario. Very quickly, Canada became the world's leader in harvesting organs from MAID victims. According to the American Journal of Transplantation, doctors in Canada perform almost half of the world's organ transplants from MAID, and they've done that over the past half decade. Ontario sets new records for organ donations every year. So that's one political problem solved. Just like China harvests organs from prisoners, Canada harvests them from homeless people and the elderly. Euthanasia also solves financial problems. Back in 2017, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation ran an article raving about all the money the country could save by simply killing sick people outright. You know, to take care of sick people is expensive, but if you kill them, then you save a bunch of money, it turns out. Quote, new research suggests medically assisted dying could result in substantial savings across Canada's healthcare system. Doctor-assisted death could reduce annual healthcare spending across the country by between $34.7 million and $136.8 million. The savings exceedingly outweigh the estimated $1.5 to $14.8 million in direct costs associated with implementing medically assisted dying. The article goes on to explain that it's very expensive to provide medical care to sick people and elderly people. The more frugal option is to give them a lethal injection. Problem solved. Who cares about human life anyway when there's money to be saved? Money to be saved and money to be made.
You get the point. I mean, I could have told you that. I mean, they proving God to be true over and over again. They're proving the Bible to be true. The love of money is the root of what? All kinds of evil. But hey, This is where we are today. So this is an individual on TikTok, and he is explaining why he feels the need to go through this process. Listen to his story, because this is a powerful story. It's also good to consider both sides of the issues, but nevertheless, I'm going to comment on this. Listen to him first.
I wish I'd never been born, but at least I can control how and where I die.
This is Mitchell Tremblay, a man who is asking the Canadian government to end his life. In fact, he's been waiting for years. In Canada, medically assisted dying was legalized in 2016, allowing adults with select advanced physical disabilities or ailments to end their lives with the help of a willing nurse practitioner or doctor. Access was expanded in 2021 to include those whose deaths are not reasonably foreseeable, meaning those with a serious illness, disease, or disability, and who are suffering physically and mentally from it. For now, death due solely to mental illness doesn't qualify, but that's set to be debated next year. But that does not include those wishing to die because of poverty, abuse, or homelessness, and that's why Tremblay, who is 40 years old, is not eligible despite the daily physical and mental pains he feels.
So many terrible things that I just won't waste more time with. I have no goals, no hope, no support, no wish to continue.
Like others on disability in the province of Ontario, Tremblay receives just $1,228 a month, nowhere near the livable amount for any place in Canada. He recently found student housing after another stint of homelessness in 2020 and survives off dollar store protein shakes if he's lucky. Some days he doesn't even have enough money for any food or drink.
I'm in my bed 23 and a half hours a day. I've lost a lot of weight. I was first homeless at 18, then 21, 23, 26, 32, 35, and just 2 years ago again. This past September I turned 40, and with no other way to celebrate, I ran a GoFundMe for emergency groceries.
Basic survival is not the only thing he can't access. He's also plagued by a life of abuse that started as early as he can remember.
Night terrors started at age 6 after being sexually abused by a cousin repeatedly. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was in a car accident around the same time, broke both arms and a leg. I would find her on the floor screaming out to kill me, and after a suicide attempt at 17, I was diagnosed with social anxiety, generalized anxiety, PTSD, major depressive disorder, borderline and histrionic personality disorders as well. I was kicked out and on the street by 18, working as a prostitute.
Going between garbage rental units and abusive landlords, Tremblay has been homeless 7 times. He also says that he's tried everything: counseling, therapy, and medication, a requirement for those seeking medically assisted death. Still, he faces pain every day and is angry that he can't access the procedure.
I've been hospitalized 13 times since age 17. With my doctor, I tried 43 different anxiety, depression, and mood disorder drugs, getting horrible reactions like hives and nightmares. My mind never stabilized.
There's been a lot of backlash to this bill. Some advocates say it's not inclusive enough to those who are suffering. Others say this is a result of Canada's failures to take care of unhoused and vulnerable people, allowing them to opt out through dying. But Tremblay, who has tried for decades to advocate for himself against the government's policies, says he's done seeking justice to live on.
I've lived such a miserable and broken life that I don't want anything other than MAID when it is legalized for mental illness in March. I am unwanted, unneeded, and unsupported, crashing face first into a dystopian society. I want to control my ending.
Wow. That's a sad situation. Now, with everything he said, I still disagree with him. Why? Because MAID is not the solution. Christ is the solution. If you need hope and support and love, you got to go to God for that. Maybe he doesn't know about the Lord. Maybe somebody needs to introduce him to the Lord. But his ultimate need is not medical assistance in dying. His ultimate need is the gospel. And then everything else could fall in line. But you see, friends, what we're looking at today is simply a repetition of history. Have you ever heard about the eugenics theory itself and how it has led in the 1920s, 1910 to 1920, about 250,000 people were put to sleep, should I say were killed, in the name of eugenics. So this T4 program, which was practiced by Adolf Hitler for those unwanted among us, the unneeded among us, those who were too expensive to care for, they were what you will refer to as not good enough for society, and they decided to get rid of them. Let me show you a quick video and you get the sense of what I'm talking about here. And let me hear, do you see a parallel? Do you see a parallel in the language?
The categories of the patients were those suffering from schizophrenia, epilepsy, dementia, encephalitis, and other chronic psychiatric or neurological disorders, those not of German or related blood, the criminally insane or those committed on criminal grounds, and those who had been confined to the institution in question for more than 5 years. Secretly recruited medical experts, physicians, many of them of a significant reputation, worked in teams of 3 to evaluate the forms. On the basis of their decisions, beginning in January 1940, T4 functionaries began to remove patients selected for the euthanasia program from their home institutions. The patients were transported by bus or by rail to one of the central gassing installations for killing. Within hours of their arrival at such centers, the victims were murdered in gas chambers. The gas chambers, disguised as shower facilities, used pure, bottled carbon monoxide gas. T4 functionaries burned the bodies in crematoria attached to the gassing facilities. Other workers took the ashes of cremated victims from a common pile and placed them in urns to send to the relatives of the victims. The families or guardians of the victims received such an urn along with a death certificate and other documentation listing a fictitious cause and date of death.
You heard it. We are headed there. No, we're not too far at all. Let me show you. This came about on May 2023. USA Today. Crossing state lines for assisted, you get it, medical assistance in dying. Vermont, New York, laws open what? Doors to non-residents. Oh, baby. Here we are. Here we are. Vermont on Tuesday become the first state in the nation to update its medically assisted suicide law to allow out-of-state terminally ill to use the procedure to end their lives. Man. I'm done. This is the slippery slope. On one side of the spectrum, there is abortion, right? The ending of the life of those unborn. On the other side of the extreme, there is what? MAID, medical assistance in dying. Beautiful name, but it's doing the same thing, right? Those who are older, those who are considered not good enough. It seems to me somebody's trying to depopulate the world. I could be wrong. Tinfoil hat. Conspiracy theorists, you better be quiet. But here is the thing. Whenever is it ever the choice of mankind, government, or doctors to determine which life or whose lives are more important or valuable than others? Who has given you the right to do that? You don't believe God? Well, he will say it very simply. Thou shalt not kill. It's at the heart of his commandments. But we don't believe his word. We think we know better than God. But I tell you what God also says. This is Genesis chapter 9, verses 5 and 6. There is a curse on nations who do this, okay? There is a curse. Look at this. It says, surely your blood and your lives will I require at the hand of every beast. Now, the first thing you have is beast. God even loves animals. Look at how people who think God is, no, even the animals he values. Let's go for them all. Let's go for them all. I will require them at your hands, and at the hand of every man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of men. So God has an issue with even killing animals. Now, this is not an argument for those, what do you call those vegans who make everything a big deal. There is an extreme side to this, and that's not what I'm trying to argue here. He's not saying you can't eat meat. we try not to. In our home, we're trying to stay away from it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's biblically inaccurate to eat meat. That's not the point here. But what God is saying is, by the shedding of the blood of other living creatures, okay, there is something that happens to the lifespan of the man who does that, or the person who eats the flesh. It's actually something that is biblically accurate. In essence, when you look at the Bible, you will find out the more killing there is, the less of the lifespan we have in every civilization. And in the same as we look at this today, it says, whose sheddeth man's blood, by men shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God, he made man. And the point is, God created man, and that gives man value, right? And this is the reason why this thing that's going on in Canada is simply wrong. It's wrong because they are determining which life is worth living. Whether the person is disabled, they have some medical situation with them, you just don't know what God is doing with the life. Now, there are some different cases. Now, terminally ill, he has a few days to live, cancer spread all throughout the body. It's very obvious this is between him and the family. I can understand this case. We already have that in place. It's not a new thing. But what Canada is doing and creeping his way over here in Vermont, New York, what we now seeing is a push to normalize suicide. They are prescribing death rather than dealing with the issues that is wrong with our society. Rather than doctors stepping up and do what they were signed up to do, they are saying, let's just end it. It saves us money. Is good for the government, is good for our pocket. That's the problem. That's the problem. Now let's look at this. Verse 14 of the Bible. Wait on the Lord. Now this is for people who are going through issues, who are suffering, who need hope. You need faith. That's the first thing you need. And I'm telling you, it's not easy. All right. I'm actually a heart patient myself. Okay. I have a really rare heart condition. I was born with it. And it's horrible. I hate it. Okay. It bothers me. It disturbs me. And I know my situation might not be as drastic as somebody else's. So I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat somebody else's pain. What I'm trying to tell you is I'm a patient myself. Okay. However, the reason why I think differently is because of my hope that I have in Jesus. And I have learned to wait on him. And he's been so good to me, even in the midst of my struggle, okay? And there are others who are going through stuff like this. So if you are going through some type of illness and you're feeling hopeless, you're feeling like things are wrong, and you're feeling like you can't live anymore, I want to give you a message today, and that is this one here. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. This is not easy to do. All right, for some people, this is difficult, but it demands faith. In the process of waiting and trusting in God, he has a way of working things out for you. Now, for those of you who don't have faith, you need faith. You need to pray. You need to believe. You need to hope. You need to hope in what Jesus says in his promises. And I can tell you stories, friends, of miracles. There has been people in our church who were sick. We went to pray for them. They lived 5, 10 years after we thought they were going to die in a few days. So when a person when doctors decide that so-and-so is not worth living anymore, we need to cancel them. What if God was going to work a miracle? What if that life needed to be lived? What if that experience, even the suffering that they're going through, may be one of the means through which God gets their attention? What if these situations had a reason for their existence? There are jobs, businesses, families, and in some cases, some families are very selfish. This could be a means to which, when the families come together through the suffering of a loved one, this could be a means to which, when doctors have to learn how to become better doctors, figuring out ways to deal with the issues that a patient is going through. These are all things that are happening in the world. They have a purpose for their existence. Even evil can be a means through which goodness manifests itself. But when you stepping forward and say, enough is enough. We got to make some money. We don't want these individuals anymore because they are a burden to society. They are too much on the government. Our health system can handle it. Well, maybe we should teach people how to eat healthy. We should encourage people to go and exercise. Maybe instead of glorifying that which is evil, we should promote that which is good. Talking about a good diet, a health plan, and things like that. Maybe that's what the government should be doing. But instead, they don't care. What they really want to do, I think, and I hope I'm wrong, it sounds like depopulation to me. It sounds like eugenics to me. It sounds like the death row treatment to me. It sounds like devaluing a person because you just don't think they are good enough to exist. Who do you think you are? But this is Canada. But the spirit of Canada, that communistic spirit, He's making his way over here, and we need to wake up. Like and subscribe to the page. Click the bell icon for more, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one. Bye.